I'm here with Dr. Jackie Steele, a political scientist as well as a former professor at the University of Tokyo and the CEO and founder of Enjoy Japan,
Yes.
A DEI edutech consultancy. Today, she's going to be speaking about another organization she's involved with, which is FEW Japan, and maybe you could give us a little bit of info about FEW Japan.
Yes. FEW Japan is an organization that now stands for something around the vicinity of For Empowering Women. And why do I say that? We 2 years ago thought that FEW Japan as a name, most people knew FEW Japan as FEW Japan. And so they didn't pay attention to what the F and the E and the W really meant and the history of it. And so we decided to leave that open to signaling across what different women thought FEW Japan meant for them. Kind of sort of a diversification of ideas about why they build community within FEW Japan. And on our website, we would just have all the entries that women members would give us, that it was, freedom and equality for women, or foreigners and empowerment in women, or equality and all different. You wouldn't believe the interesting, some that I can't actually say on camera, that were really fun that came in about women's empowerment and the diversity in our community. Historically, we have always pursued and been a space, I think, for personal and professional development. That's our go-to. We are an English-speaking women's association. Initially in 1981, when we were founded, which is, yes, 41 years old, it was called Foreign Executive Women. And it really was, and it was a play on words, because back in the day, in 1981, there was only a few foreign executive women in Japanese companies. And those women were finding that they really needed a space of networking, a safe space, a peer-to-peer, talking about the challenges they might have been facing within the company they were working in, strategies to navigate around the politics, how do you position around the gender authority gap sometimes, and that peer-to-peer sort of sounding board community is the reason I think that initially it was founded. And we've had a gradual expansion of our membership to be inclusive since 2008 of Japanese women, because we're an English-speaking organization, and a lot of Japanese women speak English, and a lot of Japanese women also want to network in English with other diverse women of different nationalities. So from 2008, we took away the requirement of the nationality requirement that it was for foreign executive women. And so then we pivoted the name because the F no longer could mean foreign. And that's where it changed to For Empowering Women with all multinationality backgrounds and diverse professional backgrounds. You didn't have to be an executive, but professional women of all walks. And I'm really proud to say that in the last 2 years of my presidency, our board has made a very clear commitment that we are both LGBTQ positive and we are trans women inclusive. So we've been building a gradual sort of equitable space as an umbrella organization, women of all backgrounds, all nationalities, all professional expertise. And you can be on primary caregiving responsibilities and also be active in our community. You don't need to have a business card to also be in our community. We know that women pivot in and out of full-time work, and we applaud and support all of women's choices. So we want to hold space for all that diversity and make sure that women have a safe and empowering space to really build forward for any of their projects, any of their goals, any of their vision of how they want to find happiness in Japan, and to be able to do it all in English.
That's amazing. That's awesome. That's great to hear. And I do have one follow-up question there. It's mostly about the English-speaking specificity. What's the kind of logic behind that and why English-speaking first?
I think that back in 1981, the reality was there was American women who were executives in Japanese companies, and navigating full-time an always Japanese language environment can be tiring, exhausting. You're constantly in your second language, or your third language, or your fourth language. Maybe Japanese is your fourth language. And I think it's just the idea that you can at least remove the language barrier and say, okay, in my own mother tongue, if I just want to be able to let my hair down or pull my hair up and be able to speak my challenges and my issues, it is much easier to connect in your mother tongue. And so initially I think we had a strong predominance of English mother tongue members, a lot of members from Australia, from Canada, from obviously the United States, from Britain, from other English-speaking backgrounds worldwide who live in Tokyo. It was a Tokyo-based organization. But eventually we have expanded, and now we're attracting people who are multilingual. They speak Spanish and Italian and English, and they want to network in English. They want to network in the common language with other women where they can just get the maximum exposure to the diversity of women's talent and the best sort of inspiration from all the different cool projects and professional career tracks that women are doing in Japan, and learn from each other to say, oh, okay, you started in that industry, but then you pivoted and then you went to this, and well, how did you manage that pivot, and can I learn from you on that? Because I'm in this position in my career now, and I'm thinking I want to go here. And so you're looking for role models, you're looking for mentors who are willing to, hand the ladder down, share political capital, make you introductions to your different networks to help you move your pivoting forward into what you want to deepen. And if you can first do those conversations with ease in your mother tongue or in a language that is the language of business and the language of technology and science, most foreign nationals in the greater Tokyo area do have English as a second or third or fourth language, right? So we can attract that demographic to be then really having a global-minded and global-based English-speaking conversation that's very robust. And the values in the room just are very taking multiculturalism for granted, gender equality and women's leadership, we just take that for granted. LGBTQ inclusion, trans women's inclusion, these core sort of what we would maybe think as human rights issues, but in certain countries they're just a given. When you walk into a Future Japan meeting, we take those values to be a given. We don't have to talk about it. We don't have to say, oh, so interesting that you could possibly speak 3 languages. Well, no, we just take that to be a lot of women speak 3 languages. A lot of women in Greater Tokyo have these strengths, right? And oh, you're senior at X company and you're an engineer. Oh, interesting. We don't have to deal with, oh, you're an engineer and you're a woman? What? Huh? We don't have to deal with those attitudes because women in the community get it. And we don't have to then self-defend against those sort of being put in a box. Like, how is it that you're a professor at the University of Tokyo? Well, I don't have to justify that. People don't question me on that in Future Japan. They're not shocked, right? Whereas in general society, they might say, "Oh, really? You were at Todai?" So it's just interesting to then walk in and say, you don't have to justify or explain what you're not. You just start with, "I'd like to get to know who you are. Can we go from there?" And that acceptance and diversity of that community of values seems to be more free in English. Somehow.
I can understand that, yeah.
It's more free. And people go into that value, those core values, as sort of a natural backdrop of the English language global-minded spaces. They pivot their brains and go, I'm in a global-minded English-speaking space. I can't assume X, Y, Z. So they bring a different sense of values to the table when they interact and greet and hold space for others. And we want to keep that elevated space of community building.
That's awesome. That's really good to know. I think that having that kind of as a cornerstone really is awesome. And I think it creates kind of a good segue into my next question, which was as far as like some of the major challenges that you feel your membership face, what are those in Japan maybe compared to other places?
I think it's not unique only to Japan. I think it's just more intense in Japan that if you have deep-seated gender inequality in a country, I mean, if we're as a political scientist, we're measuring always Japan internationally. We were 121st on the list of 180 countries on the gender gap, on gender inequality. Then we were 120th. Yay! Then we were 116th. Woo! There are these like very glacial changes in gender equality advancing in Japan relative to other countries. And it hurts the market. It hurts women's careers because they honestly worry that if they come to Japan, their career will die. because they're worried that the attitudes in the company will not support their career and will not see them as excellence and will not invest in them as high potential. In other countries and other markets, they don't have those worries. And if they are here and have really chosen to come take the offer, or they're already here because they're building their life here for 15, 20 years, they have their families here, not being trapped because of the gender inequality situation or the gender authority gap that can happen, where they're talked past, they're looked past when the people in senior positions in their companies are looking for high potential talent, they look past the women who are right there, and then they say, we can't find women. And they're right there, but you're looking past them because you don't recognize that as excellence. You haven't really appreciated that not excellence looks the same. And if you're cookie cutter trying to fit a woman into what the man box of excellence is, you're not going to see the women, right? You're not going to see the diversity of excellence. And you're going to miss a whole bunch of excellent men too, by the way. So we hear about those pain points. Women are safe in our space. It's confidential space. It's safe space. It's peer-to-peer support and networking. And, women will talk about harassment they experience. They'll talk about being passed over and not seen. They'll talk about the misrecognition and being stereotyped because they're a foreigner, stereotyped because they're a Japanese woman, stereotyped because they're X. And so the struggle is to be giving them tools and strategies to navigate around the histories of inequality that still are present in the market, in the mindsets of the leaders and the recruitment companies. Many women, really have very bad experiences with recruiters. The male recruiters disproportionately are not very welcoming and hospitable to women's talent sometimes, and they will not recognize the CVs that come in as worth their time. And they pretty much sometimes will just not even say, yeah, we can't help you with anything. We don't know what to do with your profile. Your profile's unconventional. And I'm like, well, yes, it doesn't fit the cookie cutter box man who went to MIT. But, how do we broaden and diversify the concept of excellence and talent? And then educating recruiters. So you can do a lot of work in that space, right? And we're loving the opportunity to work with a tech recruiting company and collaborate, because the community building is where we share these insights. And you see who's in our community, you can see the diversity, and then you can share those insights back to your company recruiters and to your company CEO and say, hey, there's all this opportunity. And other companies don't know that this opportunity is there, so let's be first, right? Let's be first. But I think unfortunately, sometimes it's like a self-defensive tactic that you have to say, don't put me in that box. No, please don't put me in that box either. No, that's still the wrong box. Can you just get to know me and look at my CV and read through all of my depth of expertise and experience in engineering or architecture or political science or law or marketing, whatever it is, and do a blind spot check on your prejudice and say, are you seeing that as excellence? And then how do you support that talent in the pipeline?
That's great. Yeah, so it's the recruitment thing. I actually have a thought on that as well. I remember hearing a statistic about how you never see the problem in your own house. Like you think, you hear oh, there's all this inequality, but we're not a part of that, clearly. And we did kind of an internal audit of our talent pool, and we found some pretty big gaps in the positions that there are gaps throughout the industry. And of course, we're thinking okay, well, we're really working towards bettering this. We're really aware of this problem. But even here, it's something that we're facing. And I mean, on one end, I remember saying this is either a sign that the industry has a problem across the industry, or that we're biased internally. And Christine, who we both know,
I love.
Yeah, she's the best. Yeah, she was it's both.
It's both.
Yeah, it's very clearly both. Yeah.
It's always both.
Yeah, and so and it really kind of opened my eyes too to just being okay, yes, there's a problem in the industry. Yes, other people are facing the same issues, but even internally, we're not doing as much as we could be, and it's something that we need to be aware of, because even internally, reinforcing this gap that
Yes.
we could be working to close. Yeah.
And I think that's the biggest empathy gap for male leaders, honestly. Women face a gender authority gap. They're not seen as authoritative and expert and excellent. They don't get the benefit of the doubt when they walk in the room that they are. Whereas men, if you walk them into the room, generally people are willing to be deferential to say, oh yeah, that man knows what he's talking about. He speaks with confidence. We're going to give him the benefit of the doubt. Men don't get that benefit of the doubt. And so women have to work that much harder to get the authority sort of seen and the excellence and the talent seen. Men, on the other hand, maybe don't get exposure to being walked past and looked past and talked over and mansplained to, right? They don't experience that as much, especially if they're senior, and therefore they don't really have the opportunity to gain that empathy for what that looks like and how that feels to be, constantly misrecognized, and then missing out on equal opportunities as a result, which hurts your breadwinning capacity, and women are breadwinners. They are primary breadwinners too in their families, and so it hurts the households that they're sustaining in this country as well. It diminishes their purchasing power to buy whatever they wish to buy, and all of that cycle, right?
Declining birth rate.
At any point, if you're able, and if any company has that insight, has that empathy, has that moment of aha, this is where laws are supposed to be having good teeth to say, you have to do it. You have to be internally auditing yourself to know where the gaps are. And then you need to go fix them. And a lot of companies go, okay, we're going to do the analysis. We figure out the losses. We have to do gender pay gap analysis. We need to know what it says now. It's a new law. Oh my gosh, compliance. And they go and they do the analysis and they go, oh. And they go, but we don't really want to have to fix it because it would make a lot of the men upstairs uncomfortable. So how do we fix it but not really fix it, but keep people comfortable? And then there's this whole sort of wishy-washy, not fixing it but pretending to fix it with like hiring one really, really, really well-paid woman. You're like, that's not a fix. That's not a systemic fix to the structural inequalities that are now all through your pipeline. From how you advertise the job role, to how you attract, to how you treat that woman in the interview process and make her feel like, respected and honored for her talents. And if it's a good fit, great. If it's not the right fit, that's fine. But that's how we are treated and seen and welcomed is also part of the journey of equity, right? And so when I'm constantly having to work with companies for my paid position with Enjoy Japan, it's equity, diversity, equity for innovation is a journey. And it's all across the processes and the systems in your company. And it's not just one. It will take probably 5 years to retrofit all of them and clean house. Literally, 2 to 5 years. And often we're not getting that sense of crisis, urgency to do it, but we're in Japan with a declining population. Limited talent pool, shrinking another 20% in the next 20 years, right? We know these facts, and so all the same companies are vying for women's talent to be able to be compliant with the law. But then they bring women into their pipelines and they don't support them in the environment, in the workplace. They do get exposed to sexual harassment or power harassment. They are not seen as equals sometimes. And so then women are like, why would I stay here? I'm going to go shop elsewhere for another job. And there's other jobs out there that have better working conditions. So then they're gone. They, 1 to 2 years, and then they pivot and they say, yeah, I can get a better opportunity elsewhere. And some of the research that came out, I think it was in the New York Times, or was it in the HBR? But one of the articles talked about there's a presumption that women are loyal and they won't leave. And it's the wrong presumption. Men are understood to be like shopping for their best opportunity, and that, if they get a better offer, they're gone. Like they're out the door, right? Oh, you're gonna pay me like $50,000 more and I get a better title? I'm gone. Loyalty is gonna be second. The reverse presumption is made that women will always be the caregiving, loyal person in the organization, and so they won't leave. So you can take them for granted, you can underpay them, you can look past their excellence and not advance their titles, and they'll stay. And women are actually getting really smart. And in the last 30 years, we see women voting with their feet, and they're just leaving. And sometimes they're saying, well, I'm just going to create my own business and be my own boss then. Because then I have complete freedom, right? And so the women's entrepreneurial push that we see in Few Japan, so many women entrepreneurs who used to be corporate. And that's a really interesting, and so we pivot. We help all of those women pivot from corporate to entrepreneur to pivot to corporate, to nonprofit, to, going on sabbatical and doing, their own health and well-being somewhere for a year. All of that we get to, as an ecosystem, support all those diverse women in their projects, and then try to educate a little bit the market about our women think this and our women are doing these cool things, and come be a part of our community to learn about this amazing talent pool and consumer base that you probably want to pay attention to. And that's where the corporate membership policy sort of strategy was born when we incorporated.
That's great. I actually have two follow-up questions from there. The first being, I want to touch on something that I want to go back to something that you touched on there with the nonprofit and the talent pool. Before we started rolling, you had talked a little bit about some of the exciting things that are going on in the nonprofit sector, and how there's this tendency to that it tends to get overlooked.
Yes.
And so I was hoping maybe you could expand on that.
Sure, thank you. And I think it's kind of a weird extension of gender inequality attitudes, that it's like, if it's an unpaid volunteer board director position, it's unpaid, kind of like women's unpaid labor in the household. We kind of go, nah, that's not exciting, or that's not professional development.
It's not real.
But everyone is shouting for, we need more women on corporate boards. We need more women on corporate boards. Why just corporate boards? Women have always been serving, always. Women are the core of serving on boards and as having legal director roles in the nonprofit sector for so many social movements, for so many welfare organizations, for so many of the public interest organizations. So we have a huge talent pool of women directors on nonprofit organizations that are seen as somehow disconnected and not a talent pipeline for eventual service on corporate boards. And as a political scientist, I know that, and in Canada, we have a very vibrant nonprofit sector. And I've always served on different boards in Canada and then in Japan. And it's just part of professional development and having a space of freedom to try new things and innovate in a nonprofit sector where you can just have fun and do things and be agile, right? You can just be agile and get shit done, right? I mean, it's different. You can have that space of leadership and training ground with others on your board of directors for your nonprofit. So in Japan, based on 2020 data, there's about 4,712 gender equality related nonprofits. Few Japan is one of them. Few Japan is an English-speaking space. It's an umbrella, and it's all nationalities. So we have, a nice advantage because we can, welcome pretty much everybody. We're not niche. Like, there's organizations that are professional niche. If you're in finance, if you're in law, if you're in economics, if you're in VC capital investment, if you're in, variety of other professional backgrounds, or if it's a nonprofit for mothers in Tokyo, or if it's a nonprofit. So those are different nonprofits. So 4,712 only for a country the size of Japan doing gender equality. Those 4,712 need an influx of funding to build capacity building and to build the leadership pipelines of the directors serving, so that those actual nonprofit spaces can be more sustainable and then can contribute and build leadership pipelines for women who could then serve on other boards or serve in other different managerial roles, or if they're interested in learning and getting trained for corporate governance, they could do that and pivot. We learn fiduciary responsibility. We learn how to plan annual budgets. We learn how to do accountability. We report out to our stakeholders. We tax file every year with Homokyoku and the law office. So we're doing all of the same things as, for us, we're a not-for-profit incorporated association. We are doing, at a very small micro scale, the same sort of issues. We have a mission, we have a brand, and we deliver to our stakeholders and our membership. So we don't have customers, but our membership is our customer base, if you will, and we deliver on programs and meaningful spending on our programs. In these nonprofit sector in Japan, 77% of the budgets of the nonprofits is being spent on programs for their members. So it's a really good return, on investment in the membership fees going into programming and service to community. What I was shocked, though, honestly, was that, for example, in Canada, we have 86,000 to 100,000 in the nonprofit space. Now, I only gave you the number for gender equality nonprofits. The total would probably be closer to maybe 100,000, but the Canadian population is like a quarter of Japan's population. So we do have an underdevelopment of the nonprofit sector and of civil society as a space of leadership talent that I think we need to invest in and think about balancing across nonprofit, working with corporates, working with public officials, working with university researchers. And I've been in all of those spaces. I wear hats in all of those spaces, and chambers of commerce, right? I wear a hat in every single one of those sectors. And so bringing up a sort of partnering for the sustainable development goals, a partnership for the goals, that's an opportunity to work multi-sector towards the values and the mission of what we're doing for Future Japan, empowering women. And so our membership corporate policy, really since we incorporated in 2020, is saying we want to invite a select group of companies who we believe are forward-thinking, global-minded, absolutely share our mission, take our core values to also be a given, all the way up to the diversity of women that we support and are an umbrella organization for. And if they are in their industry, we want to help them be leading in their industry with their voice, because they share our values and they share our mission. And so then we want to make sure those corporate values are seen on the marketplace and reinforcing, and that we can support and mutually amplify these issues of course, women's empowerment includes the diversity of LGBTQ women or women of different nationalities, multilingual women, Japanese women, trans women. We hold space for all the different professional backgrounds of all women. Women in tech, women in architecture, women in law, women in finance, women in all of those different expertise. And that, I think, is an invitation. So we don't actually approach many companies at all. We want to select few, one per industry, that we think can show and lead and raise the bar for showing their values. And Wahl+Case along that journey was the first tech recruitment company, the first organizational member that we had the honor of onboarding in 2020 to support our mission. And we were so excited because it was, Casey's done a lot of work, your CEO, on empowering women in the entrepreneurship space. His documentary movie around Startup Girl. And he's spoken on our panels, and he just, every time I asked for support, he was, I'd love to speak for your organization, and yes, I can, add in this lens from a man's perspective, a man saying, these are the commitments that we need to be showing up for, because it has more power inevitably when it comes from a man than when it comes from a woman, when we're talking about women's equality or women's empowerment. And so every time we asked, and then I said, we have a corporate membership policy. Would you, like for your company, would you be willing to invest? This is an ESG investment. We handle the social, as ESG, the environmental, social, and governance investing. We are a nonprofit, but we are also an investment in ESG and DEI, if you want to call it, or the sustainability development goals. And maybe that would be helpful for you to show your values if you believe in this as a company. And he was like, we do believe in that as a company. So we can do that.
Yeah, happy to be a part of it. And so that actually leads me to another question, which is, are companies generally equitable when they approach you to be a member, or how do those interactions usually go? And maybe what has your thinking been behind it from 2020?
Sure. I think it's a mixed variety. We've been not really disseminating a lot of information about this new policy because we do want to have the right to invite in and approach companies that we do see on the market showing up consistently, more for sort of a lens on gender equality, on women's leadership, having some strategies around that. They don't just host a one and done International Women's Day event and then tick a box,
Post on social media.
All of our members are very intelligent. We all see through all that. That is not actual an investment in women's empowerment. And so we tend to invite. And we do now start getting more, we've been sort of putting more of the information out broadly. And sometimes the information comes back as oh, we'd like information about this. Can you, give us information about, we'd like to be able to solve these problems that we have. Do you do this? Do you do that? And they're trying to match what is their pain point they're trying to fit, and is it the right thing to have their women of their company get memberships with us and be involved in the professional development in our space that we provide, which lowers the bar and the demands that they would have to run in-house women's leadership programs, right? Because we're doing them all volunteer-led board. And we deliver a high caliber professional training in a confidential safe space. We know how to hold space for women. They often don't really know how to curate that space. They don't have leaders who know how to facilitate that space. And so it's really a bit of a lift. So then, yes, coming in and having their women be also empowered, have some marketing branding support that we would offer through our marketing give back, getting sort of speaking engagements, right? Showing up at our Shinnenkai and presenting to our members about what you do and what the company's about. They're interested in that. I think there's sometimes different perspectives that nonprofits are kind of like charity cases.
Yeah.
It's like, it's kind of like a charity. It's kind of like philanthropy. It's like, I'm up here and you need my money. And, well, I could give you my money, but what are you going to give back for me? And is it really worth my time? And is it going to be good, transactional? It feels kind of transactional. And we're like, well, if you would like to be a part of our community and pay a membership fee and be a part of our community on the same ground, we would love to have that if you are interested. These are our core values. This is our mission. This is what we support. And we would like you to be in the community, so we have a sort of partnership relationship building over the next 2 years. So it's a 2-year commitment. It's not a one and done. It's not a 1 year. It's like we were building over time, because political capital and social capital takes time to build those networks of trust. And I know that. That's what I'm doing with companies in my paid life all the time, is helping them build trust, sustainable trust. So we do get that kind of, sometimes it's a top down, they're sort of thinking they're above because they have such a big brand presence. Like we would obviously need them more than they need us. And I actually don't, as president, think we do need that brand. We have a certain budget. We know how to run our events on a certain budget. We could do a little bit more, and we could do different things a little bit more if we had a little bit more money. But we're not going to compromise our ethics or an integrity, nor be in an egalitarian relationship and participate in being in an egalitarian relationship to have access to this brand that thinks they should be able to buy access to 260 women consumers and professional talent in this market that has a shrinking talent pool. We have a tremendous base in our community that we want companies to honor and acknowledge, and then come down and say, can I partner with you in an egalitarian relationship? And how do we get to know you, and how can we help your mission? And then we will say, what is your business needs? How can we help amplify a special something you are working on this year? Let us amplify that across our channels, because we have tremendous communicational power in our community. 260 women who have like a 2 degrees separation to almost every other woman in the country who speaks English. I kid you not. It's like 2 degrees of separation all across the country. So you get sort of the underground radio channel that if this core group of women know about something, it will trickle across the country. And so we started a strategy to build nationally when COVID hit. And that was a big pivot because of COVID. Normally we were only serving Greater Tokyo. Mm-hmm. And so now we've said, I've built this sort of vision to say, we need to bring in women from the regions. I was always in the regions. I never could join really and be a part of few. And I know so many women in the regionals who are like, I wish I was in Tokyo so I could be a part of Few Japan. And they couldn't. And I was in Nagano, and then I was in Sendai, and I could never really come in and do that networking. And so then you can't figure out your pivoting, because you don't know, you don't know all the different actors and where they are and all the opportunities. You don't even hear about the opportunities when you're in the rural areas sometimes. So the pandemic silver lining, we went all remote. We had to pivot and DX our organization. We DX'd our nonprofit board governance. We DX'd all of our reporting. We DX'd everything in our organization to keep up and say, well, now if it's a Zoom call, we can have everybody from Hokkaido to Kobe to Fukuoka to Chigasaki to Aomori to New York. Former members who've lived in Japan for 3 years and were active with Few, they're back in New York and they're missing their friendship groups in Few and still joining from the United States and Canada and Montreal and Europe. So we've now got this very interesting sort of global possibility because of the online community building we could do and sustain for the last 3 years. And so now we're pivoting back to go, how do we do hybrid? How do we do some in-person with regional lunches across the country, in-person, small networking, and do our regular nationwide, anybody can join, Zoom-hosted meetings. And we're trying to build a good balance of both the in-person networking where women build and bond and trust and get to know each other and have fun and, yes, drink, or go for hikes or go for cycling, whatever it is they want to do, as well as getting sort of the inspiring speakers, the panel exposure to leaders or new thoughts, getting to know all the unconventional women in this country, Japanese, all nationalities, unconventional journeys that are so inspiring. And that then make them go, I don't need to worry about being put in a box by all of these spaces. I'm not going to stay where I'm just tolerated. I'm going to now join and learn from all of these women who are being celebrated in their spaces for who they are. And there is a whole space where you can be celebrated as a woman in this country. And Few Japan helps you feel that power, experience that acceptance, and then we want to help the women feel like, I have negotiating power in this market. I have negotiating power in this market for the next 30 years. How am I using it? And then we talk tactics, we talk strategy, and we have a peer-to-peer annual program where it gets more workshop in depth, where we talk how do you build your professional career, your skills, your persona, your profile online, and we do more skills building, hands-on, so that women are really getting sort of the strategy and the how-to, and the implementational support, all peer-to-peer. I think getting just even that reality and building nationally and sending the message out will change the market slowly. And so it's a very graceful, slow build. We're doing, with Wahl+Case is from the tech sector. Code Chrysalis is a coding boot camp. Audi is from the luxury car industry supporting us. We have Tokyo Family Stays, which is doing sort of, family stay locations in Tokyo. We have Sasuga Communications, which is doing communications coaching for women in Japan. These are the companies, small and big, who want to be a part of our community. And we're going to keep inviting a few strategic, one per industry, who we really think are authentic in trying to move forward on supporting these kinds of values in Japan so that it becomes normalized.
That's awesome. I think that's super interesting. And the other thing that I wanted to ask in that line was, so you mentioned that you're inviting companies for the most part. Is there anywhere that you would want companies to reach out to you, or what's maybe the best way to get involved if you are a company looking to become a member of Few?
Sure, thank you for that. And we do have our presentation deck on our website, and there's a spot for corporate members where they can check to get more information, and they can apply. So they can manifest their interest. We want them to look at our presentation deck to understand about our community, know who we are, our values, what is our offer, what is the membership fee. And if they're really interested, then they can apply and manifest their interest. And then we have a meeting with them, and we talk through their goals. We want to know how can we support them, what supports them in terms of what we can offer within the context. And so we have those next conversations. We are a volunteer board. We don't have capacity to meet with 50 companies in the next 2 weeks. We don't even have, that capacity building we're a volunteer-led board. So having companies who understand what volunteer nonprofit service means, we're not always available to them all the time, because this is a volunteer, professional caliber. We take our roles very seriously. We deliver on all of our fiduciary and legal responsibilities, and we serve our members really well. But that doesn't mean you're always on, always available. And we are working full-time professional women. Some of us have families, elder care. Some of us serve on our chambers of commerce boards, also volunteer. Some of us are serving on other boards, like the new Pride Business Alliance Japan LGBTQ Chamber of Commerce. I've been involved with building and serving in that space. we're involved in a lot of different leadership hats. And this is, I think, the strength of women's leadership in Japan and elsewhere. But even in Japan, women are in multiple, they have like 5 hats on. So their sort of breadth of understanding of the market and different community spaces and different corporate aspects or market aspects or consumer perspectives, they see a very broad cross-section, often different from the profiles, traditional profiles of what salarymen or senior men maybe experience. And that is a wealth of information for understanding your market. So I think we do want that empathy, right? That volunteer nonprofit service is also a co-creation of relationships. And it's a shinrai kanke. We're building shinrai kanke over time. We're building relationships of trust with you for the next 2 years. And so how we greet each other in those first calls matter, right?
Totally. Yeah, and okay, so I like that this is kind of the state now of the members and recruiting companies to be a part of this. What was maybe some of that underlying, like you mentioned, avoiding those egalitarian relationships. When you implemented this, like what specifically were you like trying to keep out maybe as far as some of these relationships that we've seen in the past? Like there's a tendency to get very hierarchical, and so yeah.
Well, we have on our board of directors, we have women from about 10 different nationalities. So one, for the companies who come and meet us on a call, I hope they've looked at our board of directors and seen our website and seen our leadership talent and looked on LinkedIn what our profiles are. Do they have a sense of who they're meeting, the diversity coming into the room and the expertise coming into that call, so that there is sort of a greeting of each other, because we would do our homework and we would make sure that we look up on LinkedIn, this is a company applying to us. What is their mission? Do they have a DEI policy? Are they doing ESG investing? Do they have anything that shows that they are really genuine about trying to start the process? Even if they haven't done anything and they want to start and learn, we'll hold space for that. We'll hold space for that and try and be a partner with them as well. But I think it's about not only understanding the diversity of the perspectives that we have in our board and that we have in our membership, but then also, right, how do you build a relationship that's not based on, I'm going to give you a donation and then
I expect
goodbye.
Yeah.
Or I'm going to give you a donation so you owe me. Yeah. And it's kind of a passive-aggressive hierarchy implicit. And we don't need the money that badly, so we will not compromise on that. We don't need the money to that extent that we will compromise on being involved in that kind of if it's really not a genuine horizontal partnership. And I think it's a business strategy. We know companies that do DEI seriously, they do it as a business strategy. If you're doing it seriously, then you will understand that investing in a women's empowerment nonprofit, you could hold a workshop and say, can we run a workshop that helps us take the pulse of women consumers on XYZ that we are developing for our market, and we'd love to hear women's perspectives on this, and can we lead a workshop for you? If you're a strategic sustaining member of our organization, or if you're a corporate sustaining member of our organization, if you're an organizational member, and there's 3 different tiers, 3 different types of cost of membership, and that gives you the ability to sort of beta test some ideas against a very educated professional women's consumer group. I would think that's a dead win. This is a given win of the relationship and community building and the synergies you can build of reciprocity to get better products on the market for also the diverse women in our membership, because our diverse women's membership are the consumers for their households. And they want companies to be tailoring their products to our needs. So then do the market research and know your consumer base and the diversity of your consumers in this country. And you can do it in English. You don't have to do it all in Japanese, because some global companies can't, not global companies, but smaller companies don't actually have the capacity to run it all in Japanese if they're a foreign-led company. So those foreign-led companies can get valuable market research through Fear Japan's membership if they're willing to invest and be a part of our community and see for the long game how this is really a reciprocity. So I think we can get there, but it is sort of it's kind of a reverse mentoring into a new dynamic of what does equity look like? What does egalitarian relationship look like? This is not philanthropy. This is not, throw money and run. It's really about, do you want to be in a relationship around women's empowerment for the long game, for Japan, for the economy, for profit margins, for their profit margins too, because we know that women support significant purchasing power.
Yeah, that's awesome. So I think that's super interesting, and we're coming up towards the end now, and so I just wanted to go through maybe a few things, a little bit about why you joined FEW, and how you found it, and then also your presidency. So yeah, I guess maybe if you could give the background on the impact maybe FEW had for you, and then your timeline there.
Sure. And if I reflect back, I had tried to be a member very early on when I was living in Sendai, and I just thought I would like to, when I come to Greater Tokyo, I was living in Sendai, and I thought I'm doing postdoc research on diverse citizenship at the law faculty in Tohoku, and I thought, if I go to Tokyo, when I go to Tokyo, it's only from time to time, it would be nice to be able to meet up with a bunch of really badass women and, network, learn what's in Tokyo. And so I was a remote member back in the day. So I was a remote member because all the events were in person in Tokyo. I could only travel in a couple times, right? And so it felt kind of a disconnect. You couldn't really get the relationship building over time. And then I sort of, went into my academic career and was busy in academia, in the political science field, in the Japanese National University system. And as an academic, you network with academics. So I was paying memberships to the Japanese Political Science Association and the International Political Science Association and the Canadian and the European Political Science Association. So I was paying membership dues, professional dues to all 4 organizations. So then I was sort of not really feeling like as an academic, FEW Japan would be as pertinent at the time, and especially if I'm not living in Tokyo, which I wasn't. And as I started to think, I think I need to pivot out of academia. I think I want to do something different. I think I would like to pay forward my research on diversity and equity and public policy in Japan and Japanese citizenship and the laws and compliance and all of those issues towards a DEI, edutech, consulting, think tank, research company. And as I started to think about that pivot, I thought, I think I need to network with other women who would be able to guide me on this, right? And for the former program director reached out and said, hey, do you want to come on and be the next program director? You get to design the panels and the talks and invite the inspiring speakers and sort of be able, to curate what is the exposure to our membership of the topics you think they should be hearing about and that our board thinks should be important for our membership. And I thought, oh, well, I've been doing that in academia for 25 years. I can do that. I can build a panel. I can build and find interesting speakers. I know people across all the different sectors because of my academic research. I've had to speak to parliamentarians, politicians, nonprofit leaders, different types of people, corporate women. So I said, sure, that'd be great. Why not? I've always done volunteer nonprofit service in Canada before. So I said, sure. Little did I know that then it would go to program director, and then it would be vice president for 2 years. And then we were at a pivot point where the board was saying, if we're not incorporated, and this is a struggle a lot of organizations actually have, if you're not incorporated and anything happens and there's an accident at one of your events, there's no liability protection. And it would be ultimately the president, even if it's a non-legally registered organization, if anybody decided they felt they wanted to put a claim against you, they would be literally putting a claim against the president. And so we started these conversations, and the president would then be turning to their board, their volunteer board, saying, we have a claim against us, and how are we going to handle this together? And your personal assets become at play. And I sort of felt that's too much of an ask of women. It's really too much of an ask of professional women who are building their generational wealth to hand to their children and to the next generations of having their daughters have financial stability, and they're working hard to build prosperity and abundance for themselves, and then to have this nonprofit space not be sort of protecting them. We thought we had a consensus, and for 3 boards in a row of 3 years, conversations, heavy debates around, do we incorporate, do we not incorporate? And the issue comes up every sort of 5 years as something that would get redebated. And finally, I understand the law, I understand political science, so I said I will take the responsibility. We did all come to a consensus. 2 boards in a row decided yes, as a democratic decision, yes, we would incorporate. 2 full boards, back to back, validated that course of action. So I said, well, I know how to do it. I can work with the lawyer. And so we started the work. And it was really, it's a lot of work to just set up the incorporation. Figuring, it is a lot of work and it isn't a lot of work, but if you have a bit of a lawyer supporting you or a legal shihoshohi, they call it, I think, like not a notary public, but someone who does the paperwork and knows. But so you have decisions you have to make. You have to decide who's going to be your members, your vote holding members. We have our individual membership and corporate membership policies that are separate from the articles of incorporation, so we can evolve these frameworks and policies freely at the board level and not have it be in like the articles of incorporation, which is more like a constitution that's harder to change. We have to pay to change it each time. So we did a very rational division of labor to keep agile, but to get the protection of the law. And I think since that point, then for me, it became a question of, okay, now that we have the legal foundations, now we can on record have actually companies investing in us. Mm-hmm. Because companies don't invest in something that's off book. They need a receipt, right? And so I said, incorporation will help us build financial sustainability for the organization so that we can last for another 41 years, right? We've been around for 40, let's go to 80, let's aim. And so we want the financial stability. And I think I had seen that in the Japanese civil society, having researched women's movements in Japan, the women's movements, the organizations tend to be fairly small organizations. They are issue specific often. And they ebb and flow with their leaders, the founder leaders in some ways. So there's a personalistic politics involved in the ebb and flow of their growth. And I wanted an institutional base that Future Japan would last, regardless of who was at the helm. It wouldn't be tied to this person being the face and name and building a clientelistic, personalistic politics only around one person. I diversified intensely our board for that reason. So we have not just English-speaking Americans, Canadians, Brits, but all nationalities on our board to bring in a breadth of diversity of who actually is in Japan, of multiple nationalities, of experience, racialized women for different types of racialization, different professional backgrounds, obviously. So that whole journey then was a huge pivot for the organization to be financial sustainability. We lowered our membership individual fee because I went after corporate membership fees to fill the gap on the funding so that women wouldn't have to be self-funding women's empowerment alone. Because there's nothing worse than saying, oh, you're a marginalized group, self-fund your empowerment. There's no logic in that, right? But we do this in liberal democracies around the world. Oh, inequality is a problem for you? That's a women's issue. Why don't the women solve it? Like, women didn't create it, right? So I really wanted corporations and organizations to be able to lean in and partner and say, yeah, we'll invest in this to lower the cost burden for the individual women who are fighting it on other fronts and living in it already. They're doing enough to self-defend every single day of their lives. So let's give them at least a little bit of a support in the sustainability of this organization, who's doing all the heavy lift with our volunteer board of directors, unpaid, to run everything. That's a huge investment too. And then we have volunteers in our members who join committees and they're also supporting. But I think the individual sort of out-of-pocket amount doesn't need to be so high because corporate members can come in and partner and organizations come in and be our partners and we grow together. And then, what's the expression? A rising tide lifts all boats. Yeah. And if we're doing that, we're creating a brighter light shining for women's equality and women's leadership and women's empowerment. And in Japan, and that's not negligible. I think that alone is just changing the narrative. And if we have a lot of diversity of stakeholders changing the narrative on that, I think the ripple down effect can be really quite exciting.
That was perfect. Thank you so much, Jackie. Just lastly, I just want to give you the opportunity to shout out anything that you maybe have upcoming or website, whatever you want to put. I mean, we'll put everything in the description as well, okay. But just in case there's any last message that you want to deliver.
Well, I think first off, for any English-speaking woman in Japan, if you want a safe space to be peer-to-peer networking and a brave and bold space, we're fun and we're badass. You know, we have fun as we support each other and learn from each other. So if you're out there and you're feeling isolated, one, join Few Japan. You can join just online. You just literally go online and join. And we'll connect you to our Slack space, which is then our online digital community. We can speak all year long together, and we have channels that are issue specific or interest specific. So one, that would be my call out to all individuals. Corporations or organizations who believe in women's empowerment and our mission, we would love to have a real conversation about how we can work together and partner. So please get in touch through our online process as well. And I think having companies talk about the importance of women's empowerment. I think everyone can do that, and I think in particularly having audits happening in all organizations. Nonprofit sector doesn't necessarily pay women better. It's not just corporations that take advantage of the fact that you can pay women less. Honestly. So nonprofit sector, corporations, whatever your organization is, do you have an internal check on, are you looking past your talent, your talented women? Are you underpaying them? Are you making them do a ton of unpaid work in the office that really they don't need to be doing and the men aren't doing it? Just even paying attention to those things. Definitely, I think that individual leadership, from small to big actions, it all matters and it all builds a momentum. So we want that community to be built and to grow nationally across Japan, particularly to the regions. So we'd love to also meet more companies from the regions. And if you have recommendations of your colleagues or partners in crime in the regions that, you know, Wahl+Case is working with, we would love to have those recommendations of who do you see as leading that you admire for their values on women's empowerment in Japan, because word of mouth and recommendations matter. Yeah. And we have trust, so we trust the recommendation more, and then it builds this beautiful, virtuous cycle. Yeah.
Perfect. Awesome. Thank you so much, Jackie. Thanks so much for spending this time with us. And yeah, looking forward to speaking again soon.
Thank you for having me.